Another moonlit night swept across the tiled rooftops of Konoha. As always, the village blissfully slumbered under the ever-watchful eye of the ANBU. It was also another late night for the Hokage, who was finishing up the day's paperwork. Just as he had scrawled his signature across a trade permit, he paused his pen. He could sense someone heading straight for his office. A moment later, a red-haired ninja using the body flicker technique appeared in the space before him. From the disheveled appearance and the smell, Naruto looked as though he hadn't bathed in days. More importantly, he was alone, when Hiruzen had received a messenger bird from Kakashi informing him that the whole team was on their way back. "Naruto, where's the rest of your team?" asked Hiruzen. "I'm a clone," said Naruto. "I wanted to know why you sent that missive to Team Shirakumo telling us to stay in Wave Country." Alarms started going off in Hiruzen's head. If such a missive was sent out, it was not under my authority. "Naruto, what is going on?" The hard look in Naruto's eyes told Hiruzen that this had only confirmed the boy's suspicions. "I'm guessing someone intercepted my messenger birds. They must have also forged your seal on a fake missive to keep our teams in Wave Country. I tried getting here as fast as I could, but I had to conserve chakra. I'm going to report back." The clone broke off. His eyes widening, he fell to his knees. In a cloud of smoke, he disappeared. Slowly, Naruto rose to his feet. Everything was very still. And larger, as though magnified. Or was it his senses instead? Taking in his surroundings, he surmised in an instant what had happened. While Naruto had fought the Hunter Nin, Shirakumo had died trying to take down Haiden, and to finish the job, Rai had paid with his life. Further out, Naruto could see yet another body, Sai, but his chest alone moved up and down, breathing. "Kakuzu, you bastard, where are you? Come back here and bring me my body." It was Haiden's head, sitting at least a dozen yards away from its body. Impossibly, Haiden seemed to have survived even a beheading. The earth shook and in a daze, Naruto looked up. Snow drifted serenely down from the sky as a raging battle played out in the background. Jiraiya faced off against Kakuzu, and what appeared to be 4 black humanoid masses. It didn't seem right to Naruto. His teammates were no longer here. And yet the world continued to move. Some of the snow that had been falling had melted, and the ground shimmered with water. Naruto caught a glimpse of his reflection, crowning a blank face. His hair burned like fire and his whisker marks stood out starkly. Droplets of blood rolled off his chin and landed in the water, dyeing it red, and his reflection disappeared. This quiet, burning sensation. He had never felt like this before. No, that wasn't quite right. He had felt it once before. He could remember now. It had happened years ago and the memory of it had been forcibly taken from him. But it was all coming back. Everything was fuzzy and dim. He could hear the sound of running water. The back of his head throbbed, where they had struck him. He wondered where his captors were taking him. He wished he had remembered to wear his scarf to cover his face. Maybe all this wouldn't have been happening, then. There was someone still fighting his captors. He didn't know who it was. They were strong, and several of his captors groaned and fell to the ground. Eventually, however, his captors managed to put a sword through their chest. The person collapsed, and their mask fell off. With a jolt, he saw the face of the woman who slammed bowls of rice down on his table every day. She had never had a kind word for him before, and yet she had fought for him. Now, she was gone. Something inside him snapped. Everything he had ever felt in his short life came together into a single, black emotion. It seethed and roiled. It wanted release. His vision was turning red. A guttural sound filled the tunnel, and he soon realized it was coming from him. The next thing he heard was the sounds of his captors screaming. Before long, bodies floated face down at his feet in a river of blood. Back in the present, Naruto opened his eyes. An immense metal gate loomed before him. Something huge and dark lurked behind it. A single seal on the gate doors blocked its escape. He knew it was the only thing preventing the demon it held captive from devouring him. "So you've finally come to me of your own will," a deep voice filled his head. "What changed?" "There's nothing holding me back anymore," said Naruto. The demon roared in laughter. "You finally understand." A wave of dark, tainted chakra surged out from between the bars of the demon's cage and entered Naruto. He felt his depleted chakra reserves fill up to the brim, and then some more, as it overflowed and enveloped his entire body. He had never felt so much chakra before, it almost felt as though it was eating away at his own body. Naruto was the Jinchuriki of the Nine Tails. He had carried its burden in ignorance for many years, and upon his revelation, tried to deny it. Though he hadn't wanted to admit it, he had been afraid of the consequences. But all that was gone. There was nothing he had left to lose. Now, he decided, it was time to embrace it. Forget about me. Tazuna yelled. Just go. Kakashi hesitated. More than anything, he wanted to investigate the source of the ground tremors. He could feel it in his gut that it was linked to his team's disappearance. But after all that he'd done to defend the old bridge builder from Zabuza, he couldn't leave him there by himself. Nor did it seem like a good idea to bring him along. After a moment's thought, Kakashi summoned back his Ninkenpack. Take him to safety, he instructed his hounds. In agitation, Tazuna bobbed his head. I'll be fine. Your students need you. He nodded. With a final look back at Zabuza's still body, he left. As Kakashi ran alone through the fog, the ghostly image of the masked man who had killed Zabuza floated into his mind. He had disappeared before Kakashi could give chase, leaving behind only questions. The strange thing was, even though it was his first time seeing the man, he had a sinking feeling it wouldn't be their last. The marshlands passed quickly. As the air grew colder, the tremors grew more pronounced. He knew that he was drawing close. He could only pray that he wasn't too late. Kakuzu couldn't remember the last time he'd had such a bad day, and he had lived a long life. It didn't rank quite as high as the day he'd returned to his village following his failed assassination attempt on the first Hokage, nothing ever would, but it was up there. It didn't help that once again, he was battling for his life against a leaf neem. It rankled that he was even here. While Jiraiya's head would have made an excellent trophy, Kakuzu would have preferred to fight him on a stage of his own choosing. No, the only reason he was here at all was because of the leader's orders. Don't lay a hand on the Jinchuriki. Capture the Jinchuriki's teammates. Kill everyone but the Jinchuriki. Easier said than done, when the Jinchuriki kept popping up in his vicinity and when everyone included one of the Sannin. Kakuzu knew that the Nine Tails had to be extracted last, so why go after its Jinchuriki at all at this time? What was the point? Nonetheless, he carried out his orders without question, even while that bastard Haiden was talking his ear off with his complaining. He trusted that the leader always knew what he was doing. Still, he couldn't shake off the sense that there was someone else pulling the strings, pushing around Kakuzu as a pawn in their game. Suddenly, Kakuzu was yanked out of his thoughts when the sage froze, halting his assault. And then Kakuzu felt it too. A wave of vile chakra blasted into the air. It was powerful enough that the force of it alone blew away the fog in their vicinity. Kakuzu immediately spotted the source. It was the Nine Tails Jinchuriki, surrounded in a translucent shroud that he recognized as the tailed beast's chakra. Four tails, made out of the same vile chakra, churned wildly at his back. The Seven Tails Jinchuriki they had captured had resorted to using this power too, before they overpowered her. With a stab of annoyance, he wondered whether Haiden had violated the leader's orders and attacked the Jinchuriki. Kakuzu's battle against Jiraiya had not afforded him many chances to check in on how his idiot partner was doing. Then, he saw the headless body. Oi, Kakuzu, the head howled. As he watched, two of the Jinchuriki's chakra tails picked up the body and ripped it apart with ease. The remaining tails picked up the screaming head and slammed it down with a force that split the ground in two. Well, there goes another partner. Powerful gales of wind accompanied every swing of the beast's tails. The sheer force of its chakra warmed the atmosphere, causing the snow to melt into a shower of rain. To Jiraiya, its overwhelming chakra seemed to be the very embodiment of nature. It was hard to believe this demon was Naruto. No, he mentally corrected himself. This was the Nine Tails emerging from Naruto. Somehow, the seal had weakened enough for it to physically manifest itself. The beast turned its hate-filled gaze on Gamabunta. Its tails whipped through the air toward them and Gamabunta braced himself, ready to return the blow, when the tails arched around them and slammed instead into Kakuzu. The missing Nin, who had been on the verge of striking an unsuspecting Jiraiya, bulleted down through the rain and crashed into the wet ground. Torrents of mud flew in every direction as his body continued to bowl through the earth, leaving behind a long, uninterrupted strip in his wake. Stunned, Jiraiya watched the beast let out a deafening howl that shook the skies. The moment Kakashi felt the Nine Tails chakra surge through the marshland and blow away the fog, he braced himself for the worst. And yet, nothing could have prepared him for the scene of carnage that met his arrival. At the base of a cliff, bodies with all too familiar faces littered the muddy ground. It was an image that brought back painful memories of the Third World War. His colleague and fellow veteran, Shirakumo. A crater with a body mangled beyond recognition. And Rai. His student. His eyes were still open, staring glassily up at the gray sky. The day he had first met his genin team flashed in his mind. You can tell me your likes, dislikes, hobbies, your dreams. When nobody answered, Kakashi sighed and gestured towards a genin with a scar running down his face. How about you go first? The boy scowled. The name's Higain Rai. My goal is to become the best weapons specialist in Konoha. And, I hate being ordered around. The sound of rain filled his ears. As he watched the droplets hit the boy's still face, Kakashi's heart grew heavy. It seemed like it was only yesterday, when his team had passed the bell test. The air crackled. A blood-red ball of chakra shot through the sky and slammed into the cliff with a thunderous explosion. Breaking off from the point of impact, giant boulders began sliding down, crashing into the ground. Gamayuden, Toad Oil Bomb. A mass of murky oil burst through the air, coating the rampaging beast. Jiraiya followed by directing his spiky white hair to wrap itself tightly around the beast, dragging it down to the ground. For a moment it seemed to work, and then with another roaring surge of chakra, it burst out of its bindings. Infuriated, the beast switched its attention from Jiraiya, who was forced to dodge out of the way. Kakuzu seemed to have had enough, taking this as a window of opportunity to escape. Jiraiya saw out of the corner of his eye as the hulking missing nin leaped backwards and flickered away in a puff of smoke. Jiraiya-sama, shouted a voice. A familiar silver-haired ninja appeared, gently setting down 3 bodies beside a shrub. Jiraiya did a double take. Is that you, Kakashi? Did Sarutobi-sensei send you? Kakashi stood, his infamous Sharingan glowing in his left eye. It's a long story. It was as though he was viewing everything from a distance, through a red haze. He was in control of his body, and at the same time, he was watching his own body move. Haiden was dead, or at least crushed beyond repair, and Kakuzu seemed to have disappeared. His enemies were gone and Naruto knew he had already achieved his objective. And yet, it wasn't enough. There was a void deep in his chest that he didn't know how to fill. He could feel his body thrashing about, itching with the desire to be put into action. To go somewhere, anywhere, and not come back. Only, there was nowhere to go. He had longed to leave Wave Country and return to Konoha. But there was nothing for him there anymore. The marshlands stretched out into infinity behind him while to his front, past the edge of the cliff, he could see a dark sheet of water. It was the sea, disappearing into the horizon. He wondered what lay beyond there. Pushing back, he readied himself to propel his body forward and... Naruto, a faraway voice shouted. It took a moment to process that it was his name being called. Naruto blinked, and all of a sudden, Kakashi stood beside him in his mind. His left eye glowed red, he had activated the Sharingan. Naruto took an involuntary step back. He had seen Kakashi use it sparingly in battle, but never before like this. The Ninetales let out a growl. You're not an Uchiha. Ignoring the beast, Kakashi turned towards Naruto. What's going on here? Where's Mayu? Naruto didn't respond, and the Jonin's face turned solemn. Come back, Naruto. This isn't the answer. What would you know, sensei? The part of Naruto that was still rational knew it wasn't Kakashi's fault. But bitter words were coming out of his mouth, like vomit, and he couldn't hold them back. It's not like you were here when everyone died. Kakashi drew a sharp breath. I'm sorry I wasn't here. I came as quickly as I could. For some reason, the apology only made him angrier. It doesn't matter anymore. I've failed my mission, my team is gone. There's nothing for me to care about anymore. Do you know how that feels? I do, said Kakashi. Taken aback despite himself, Naruto stopped. The Jonin's gaze, while trained on Naruto, seemed to be focused on something far away. I also lost my team, in the World War. Obito and Rin. They're gone because of my failures. Ignore him, the Ninetales snarled. He's only trying to confuse you. It would have been all too easy to do as the Ninetales said. It was tempting enough that Naruto almost gave into it. But as he considered Kakashi's words, he could feel his anger seeping away. And in its place, he started to remember things. He thought of his first day at the academy, when he had felt like the only person in the world. He thought of the day he first killed as a genin, and fell asleep to the rocking of the wagon. He thought of his birthday, in which Mayu baked a too-sweet cake and Kakashi presented him with a tanto. He thought of the Chunin exams, looking up at a dark ceiling and Rai asking if he was awake. He thought of Mayu calling down to him in his fight against Fu. He thought of their team, sitting down at Ichiraku's after a hard mission and ordering extra garlic with their ramen. At the time, these moments had not seemed so precious to him. Only now that they were gone, did he understand. Something in his chest throbbed, and Naruto clutched it. He could feel the void there, but he couldn't reach it. How do you deal with it, sensei? You fool, howled the Nine Tails. Kakashi inclined his head. We endure. The beast that had been bristling suddenly seemed to shrivel up before his eyes. Its baleful eyes dimming, it shrank in size, and finally, as the red demon shroud smoldered away into nothing, Jiraiya jumped forward to catch Naruto's body in midair. The body, as scratched and beaten up as it was, seemed almost lifeless. However, Jiraiya could feel his heart beating in a steady rhythm, and for that, he was thankful. As he walked back, he saw Kakashi kneel and close the eyes of the Chunin boy. Standing up, the Jonin bowed his head in prayer. Jiraiya somberly looked down at Naruto's still face, and then around at their surroundings. At some point in the night, the rain had stopped. The sun was rising, bleaching the sky in its vivid colors. It was a new day. Kakuzu didn't call it running away. He called it a tactical retreat. The Sannin had been enough trouble on his own. With the Jinchuriki rampaging and then the copy ninja showing up to the battle, he had made the executive decision that it was high time he left the country, sans his irritating partner. He had finally reached the forest, when without warning, he sensed someone following him. Kakuzu-san. Kakuzu-san. It was a high-pitched voice that Kakuzu despised from the bottom of his many hearts. Turning back, sure enough, he saw an orange mask gaining on him. What is it? He grunted. You sure hightailed it out of there, said Toby in a cheery voice. If you were worth the slightest bit of money, I'd kill you. That doesn't sound likely. Unless, the leader makes me your next partner. Toby began to sound worried. That'd be dangerous, considering how quickly you go through them. I'd be doing the world a favor, getting rid of you. Kakuzu paused, fully taking in Toby's appearance. He was carrying something large on his back and suddenly, he wondered what the man he regarded as the leader's big mistake was even doing there. Toby must have noticed him watching. It was difficult to tell through the mask, but to Kakuzu, it almost seemed as though he was smiling. Don't worry. This isn't anything you need to concern yourself about. Somehow, the Hokage had already gotten wind of the fiasco in Wave Country. By the time Kakashi and the others returned to the safe house, there were several ANBU ops scouting the perimeter. With the help of the reinforcements from Konoha, the matter was quickly wrapped up, the Wave Country's daimyo and his children were returned to their vassals. Shirakumo's genin team was informed of his passing. A sallow-looking woman was transported back to the village for further interrogation. A search party was sent out to retrieve Mayu's body, only to return empty-handed. Finally, the rest returned home. The day after their return, a funeral service was held. Half the village turned up, the procession led by Mayu and Rai's older brothers and Shirakumo's grieving daughter. Knowing their history, Kakashi had half expected Izumo to blame Naruto, but with tears streaming freely down his face, the Chunin seemed lost in his own inner conflict. Shirakumo's genin team was there, along with many of the other genins. At the mention of Rai's name in the Hokage's funeral address, a young kunoichi with hair rolled up into buns burst into tears. And then it was over. That day, a somber pallor seemed to have been temporarily cast over the village, shutters were drawn, and lights were dimmed. As the skies grew dark, everyone returned to their homes, turning in early for the night. All, except for one. From a distance, Kakashi watched Naruto stand before the memorial stone, to which 3 names had been newly added. The next day, Jiraiya approached Kakashi with a proposal to take Naruto along on a journey. Once given the choice, Naruto thought over it for a few minutes, before giving his answer. Somewhere hidden deep in the depths of Konoha, the members of the underground organization Root gathered before their leader, Danzo. Most people were not even aware of its existence. Under the orders of the third Hokage, Root had officially disbanded following the downfall of the Uchiha clan. However, to this day, the organization continued to operate in secret as the unseen force supporting the Great Tree of Konoha. One of its members kneeled before Danzo now, having finished his report. He had been sent to Wave Country as part of the Jinchuriki's team to keep an eye on his activity. However, his report was incomplete. The operative had been knocked unconscious halfway through the final battle. The only other witnesses present for the remainder of the battle, Jiraiya and Kakashi, were staunchly loyal to Hiruzen, leaving Danzo to grasp in the dark as to what had occurred. It was an unfortunate turn of events, especially given the operative's previously spotless track record. It was his first failure. Perhaps that was the reason why, while giving his report, the operative seemed uncharacteristically distracted. After dismissing the operative, Danzo stood by himself in the darkness, thinking. Whatever had happened in Wave Country, it made little difference in the end. No matter what Hiruzen said, he was not stupid enough to trust the Jinchuriki to stay loyal to the Leaf. He had heard reports that the Jinchuriki would soon be leaving the village again for an extended period of time, and it was clear to Danzo that Hiruzen was growing soft in his old age. As he considered his next move, Danzo regarded his right arm with a baleful glare. He would bide his time for now. But sooner or later, the Nine-Tails' power would be his. On the morning of their departure, just as they reached the gate, Naruto stopped. He turned around and gazed up at the stone faces of the Hokage monument, before closing his eyes. As the sun's glow warmed his face, he could hear the other villagers streaming past him, the chatter of their daily life resounding in his ears. Market prices have gone up lately. Going to meet my uncle in Tea Country. A cake for her birthday. His eyes opened. Turning back around, he saw Jiraiya waiting for him. Naruto took a step forward. And another. And then, walking through the gates, he left Konoha behind. It was raining in Amigakure, the hidden rain, but that was nothing new. Neon signs flickered, glowing sullenly in the dark of the night. Numerous metal pipes scaled a sea of rusty towers that groaned under their own weight. Copper wires, dangling from tower to tower, swayed haphazardly in the wind. To the west, the tallest tower in Amigakure spiraled above the surrounding area. Other than its height, it was easily made distinguishable by the 4 humanoid faces that protruded from each side of the tower. The village's dead were all brought to this tower for processing. It was also the rumored dwelling of their savior, Lord Pain. Ever since the lady had brought news of their lord's victory over Hanzo to the village, the hard look in everyone's eyes had changed. Ajisai could still remember the first time she saw the lady appear before the village people. With her beautiful stoic face and her wings that spanned the length of the sky, she looked every bit the role of an angel sent from the heavens. It was so overwhelming, Ajisai cried. News quickly spread of Lord Pain after that. Following the deaths of Hanzo and the members of his faction, the civil war they had thought would never end came to a close. Now, the entire village was united under Lord Pain's mission of peace and hope. Lady Angel warned them that the hidden villages of the 5 great nations would not react so favorably to Hanzo's death, and so, they continued to perpetuate the notion that their civil war was still ongoing. Months had passed since then, and none of the other villages seemed to have noticed. Nobody, Ajisai included, was too surprised. Given the other nations' history of waging battle in Rain territory and causing further havoc for their village, she didn't expect them to care about anything other than themselves. It was raining, as always, when Lady Angel appeared before Ajisai and the other genin. She descended without warning, her paper wings keeping her afloat. As she turned her pale, serene face towards them, Ajisai froze, her mind reeling at suddenly coming face to face with her idol. Then, coming to her senses, she immediately prostrated herself on the ground. The Hidden Leaf has invited the Hidden Rain to participate in their Chunin selection exams this year. Your teams will go, in the pretense of participating. The other villages must continue to believe that Hanzo of the Salamander rules the Hidden Rain. Yes, Tenshi-sama, they spoke in unison. Team Ajisai, said the lady, and Ajisai found her mind once again going into overdrive at the revelation that the lady knew her name. I have a special mission for you. Take advantage of the Chunin exams to find a Jinchuriki. A Jinchuriki? Ajisai cautiously ventured, raising her head. Suiren. The lady looked at one of her teammates. Use your sensory perception skills and look for a shinobi who harbors an enormous amount of chakra. Is that what a Jinchuriki is? Asked Suiren. Without answering his question, the lady continued, even if you don't find a Jinchuriki, bring back intel of any extraordinary shinobi from other villages. She heard the sound of flapping wings, and then the lady was gone. The other genin began to murmur in awe amongst themselves. Ajisai shared a nod with Suiren, before turning to her third teammate. He was a relative newcomer to their village. He had a pretty face but didn't talk much, speaking only when necessary. Ajisai did not know much about him beyond that he was yet another war refugee, and that he was incredibly strong. With him by their side, Ajisai had little doubt that they would be able to carry out the lady's mission to the finish. When she saw his face, however, she found herself taken aback. The usual calm demeanor was gone. Instead, a blazing look of fury burned in his eyes, and she could see his visible hand clench so hard, it shook. It wouldn't be the first time that a war refugee in their village had suffered at the hands of the Hidden Leaf. Sympathy welling up in her heart, Ajisai wondered whether her teammate was the same. For as long as Gaara could remember, the voice had always been there, whispering in his head. When he was younger, while he was aware of the voice's presence, he did not understand it. It was purely a constant stream of noise, its volume and tone tended to vary by the day, and it was relentless. He did not understand it, but it kept him up at nights when the rest of the village had gone to sleep and the sand of the desert shimmered like water in the moonlight. It was on the night of a full moon that Gaara fell to his knees before the dying body of his uncle, and felt its blood boil for the first time. The sensation racked the entire length of his body, and it was unbearable. The sand that had always served as his protection erupted around him, and everything that had been building up inside exploded into mindless, unadulterated rage. By the time the sand settled down, he knew that it was not just a voice, it was the voice of the monster inside of him, and it told him he was alone in the world. Over the years, Gaara's father, the Kazekage, tried to assassinate him 5 more times, but he survived and persisted. Shikaku continued to torment him, threatening to take over his body the moment he let down his guard, but while Gaara no longer slept, he continued to fight. His father hated him. His siblings dreaded him. His village feared him. Yet Gaara alone loved himself. And so, he lived. When he grew older, he was placed in a 3-man team with his siblings. However, while he was initially signed up to participate in the Chunin exams held at their village, upon receiving the list of registered genin from the other villages, his father withdrew Gaara from the exam. With Kankuro's promotion to the rank of Chunin, Gaara's current team consisted of his sister Temari and another genin whose name he didn't bother to remember. She was a replacement of a replacement. Gaara had killed the first following a disagreement on a mission. He didn't expect the new genin to last much longer. At some point, members of another village began to show up in his village. They were from Odogekure, the Hidden Sound. Though Gaara didn't know nor care for the details, he knew that the 2 villages were plotting to attack one of their former allies, the Hidden Leaf. Stating a period of mourning, Konoha had not held a public Chunin exam in some time. However, this year, as hosts of the exams, they were finally opening their doors to the other villages once more. From the increased frequency of meetings between his father and the Sound's representatives, Gaara knew it was time to strike. Nights passed, and the day of their departure grew closer. Gaara sometimes closed his eyes to rest them, but he dared not sleep. In the full moon, its blood boiled. It was a dark, quiet night. The moon hung low in the sky, a giant pale orb that witnessed all in silence. He was there, standing before him. Foolish little brother. If you want to kill me, then blame me. Hate me. And live on in shame. Run and run. Glowing red eyes with spinning black tomo pierced into him, and suddenly he could see the members of his clan falling in slow motion around him. One by one, they died in a spurt of red blood, and soon, he was the only one left. His brother turned his back to him. Cling desperately to life. Then one day, come before me with the same eyes I bear now. Oi, Sasuke. Are you even listening to me? His eyes slightly widening, Sasuke refocused his gaze on his teammate. Ah, sorry, what were you saying? From his reclining position against the railing, Menma rolled his eyes. I said, I heard rumors that the Hidden Mist isn't participating in this year's Chunin exam. They're in mourning since their Mizukichi died, or something. Show some respect, Menma, Sakura snapped. How would you feel if it was the Lord Third who died? That's a moot point because that old man's never going to die, said Menma in a smug tone. Sasuke looked down his reflection in the water below the bridge. It wasn't that long ago that our own village was in mourning. In the corner of his eye, he observed both of his teammates exchanging somber looks. Well, Menma said in a fake cheerful voice. It's the first time in years Konoha is hosting an open Chunin exam. I heard it's going to be a pretty big deal, with a bunch of villages attending. Everyone who's not on a mission is being called back for security. He hesitated. Do you think Naruto will come back for it? Who knows? Even Kakashi-sensei's been very hush-hush about the whole situation. Sakura gave Sasuke a coy look. Has he told you anything, Sasuke-kun? Over the past 2 years, the Jonin known as Copy Ninja Kakashi had taken over their late teacher's responsibilities. In that time, Sasuke had come to realize that Kakashi's seemingly lackadaisical demeanor was merely a front, there was true steel to his gaze, and a lifetime of hard-fought battle experience to back it. Sasuke never asked any questions however. Following the events of Wave Country, there was a mutual unspoken understanding to let sleeping dogs lie. Not really, he said. Taking his hands off the railing, he left his teammates and began to head back towards the training grounds. As they always did, Sasuke's thoughts trailed back to the moonlit events of his past. He knew that he was growing stronger with every single passing day. But Itachi's words gnawed at him deep inside, had been gnawing at him. Going on B-rank missions and the occasional A-rank, sparring with his teammates, waiting to be promoted to the rank of Jonin. Was that all there was to it? Was that enough to kill his older brother? Sasuke didn't have to search deep in his heart to know that it wasn't. The only way to defeat Itachi would be to obtain the same eyes as him. The question was, how? This was where Kakashi came in. Sasuke knew that the Jonin somehow had the Sharingan. He had caught a glimpse of it once before, when a simple reconnaissance mission had turned into a full-on skirmish with enemy forces in Rain Country. However, Kakashi had never brought it up again, until yesterday, when out of the blue, he had offered to train him one-on-one. Sasuke's cynicism warred with his frustration, and frustration won the bout. There was a restless energy inside of him that refused to subside, and he wondered whether training with Kakashi would be enough to subdue it. Before Sasuke reached the training grounds, he caught sight of the figure of his thoughts and came to a stop. Kakashi was standing in front of the memorial stone. Sasuke couldn't see his face, but even if he could, he doubted he would have been able to read anything in his masked expression. Awash in the glow of twilight, there was a white carnation at the foot of the stone slab. He wondered whether Menma, whose clan ran a flower shop, had been by. Sensing Sasuke's approach, Kakashi turned around and raised a hand in greeting. Perfect timing. Ready for your training? You're 3 hours late, Sasuke said, folding his arms across his chest. Kakashi feigned a look of surprise. I don't know what you're talking about. There weren't enough cots in the medical tent for all the groaning ninja being carried in. Strewn across the hectic space, ninja with blood-stained bandages wrapped around their heads or the stumps of what had once been limbs, drifted fitfully in and out of consciousness. Shouts filled the air as medic nin rushed back and forth, their palms glowing with medical ninjutsu. One of them noticed Karen and impatiently waved her over. Well, come on. It's about time you got here. The unhealed bite marks on her body were already starting to prickle. Karen hesitated, and the medic nin, scowling, grabbed her by the arm and dragged her to a man with a head wound. She braced herself as the man hefted himself up, then, baring his teeth around her wrist, he bit down. Hot pain seared through her body, and she felt the immediate loss of chakra. This continued, bite after bite, until Karen was so spent, she could no longer prop her own head up. Her whole body was covered in new bites, she felt as empty as a dried husk. But there must have been a few drops of chakra left within her, for she was still alive, and with that, she was left to lie down in a corner to recover. They had learned their lesson with her mother. In her crushing weariness, Karen closed her heavy eyes, and when she opened them again, sunlight streamed painfully into her eyes. As soon as the stars had disappeared, she saw the head ninja of their village, Zosui, appraising her with his cold gray eyes. His words for her were as usual, emotionless and to the point. The Hidden Leaf will be hosting the Chunin exams this year. You're going in one of our genin teams. This is your chance to redeem yourself from your failure in Sunagakure, and I'll be personally there to watch this time. You know what will happen if you fail me again. With the threat hanging in the air, he left her to pick up after herself. The memory of the look on Zosui's face when he found out that none of the Kusa genin had passed the Chunin exam still brought goosebumps. She suspected the only reason why she hadn't been drained of her chakra on the spot was because the daimyo of their country had personally commended Karen on her fight in the third test. Zosui had said it to her, your only use is your chakra. Karen lived alone in a hut along the fringes of the village. The area was empty, despite the increasing shortage of ninja as of late, Kyuzugakure was sending more and more out on missions to earn money for the village. 2 houses down, there was an older woman named Midori who had used to share some of her food with Karen. She had been sent out 5 months ago and had never returned. Just as she closed the door behind her, Karen's stomach growled loudly and she considered her options. She could go back to the medical camp for food, but her chakra reserves were still low, and she knew they would make her heal again. So instead, Karen lay herself down on the ground. It was early morning, and a few rays of daylight seeped into her hut through the cracks in the roof. However, in the haze of her weariness, everything seemed dark. She shut her eyes, but it was the same. There were no chakra signatures around her. It was dark, and she was alone. She felt herself drifting away, and wished she would never have to open her eyes again. Time passed, and hunger pains shook her awake. Sluggishly getting up, Karen put a hand over her grumbling stomach and made up her mind. Though she lacked the energy to go hunting, there were plenty of patches of mushrooms and greens to placate her hunger. The sun shone high in the sky. It burned the back of her neck as Karen slowly gathered what she found in a woven basket. As she got farther and farther away from her village, she eventually found a riverbed. Taking care to put down the basket, she lowered herself by the water and rinsed the dirt off a mushroom. Closing her eyes, she opened her mouth to eat it, when she froze. While she hadn't been paying attention, there was a large chakra signature in her vicinity. It couldn't belong to any of the villagers, it was so large, it far eclipsed theirs. Was it in the water? Reaching for a kunai, Karen backed away from the river's edge and retreated into the forest. Though it was possible the owner of the chakra had already caught sight of her, she suppressed her chakra and watched from the shade of a tree. A beat passed. And then too, the river's surface broke. A bare-chested boy, no, a teenager, stepped out of the water on the other side of the riverbank. The first thing she noticed was his hair. It was red, burning like fire in the sunlight. The second thing she noticed was that he was holding a large fish in each hand, which explained what he had been doing in the water. Her gaze shot to the basket she had left by the riverside. However, he didn't seem to have noticed as without a look back, he began to head into the forest. There was something familiar about him, both physically and in his chakra. His hair color was the same as hers, and it wasn't a common color by any means. Everything still felt cloudy, but she racked her mind and soon, a hazy memory drifted into her consciousness. A small red-haired genin, holding a blade to her neck. Could it be him? The leaf genin she'd fought against in the Chunin exam? Karen closed her eyes and checked his chakra signature again. She shuddered, it was him. It had matured in the years since she'd last felt the chakra, but it shared similarities to the one she remembered, cold and guarded, and intermixed with an immense dark chakra that made her stomach twist. However, as she probed deeper, she started to note several differences. Where it had previously been cold enough to cause her to flinch, it was now cool in the way the river water had felt on her hot hand. And where it had been rough, it now seemed more worn down. There were rounded edges in the place of sharp corners. It was chakra full of contradictions, and Karen wasn't quite sure what to make of it. When she opened her eyes, the chakra signature disappeared and all she could see was the riverbank. No, she peered her eyes and checked, there was something there. After making sure nobody else was around, she came out of her hiding spot and waded through the river to the other side. There, where the teen had been standing, was one of the fishes he'd been holding, flopping about on the rocks. Karen felt her heart stop. There was no way he'd dropped the fish on accident. Had he noticed her before she hid her presence? Why had he left this fish behind? Was it poisonous? Her stomach rumbled. After a moment's pause, she added the fish to her basket. When Karen returned home from scavenging, she cooked the fish over a campfire. The smell of freshly cooked fish caused her to salivate, and she quickly tore into it, burning the roof of her mouth as she did so. It hurt, and she was no stranger to pain, but for some reason, her eyes began to sting. Taking off her glasses, she rubbed her face clean. Had food always been this delicious? The fish must not have been toxic for that night. She found herself still alive, and she wondered why. She wondered whether Zosui would knock on her door. And as she lay on the ground looking up at the dark sky through the cracks in her ceiling, she had a sudden thought. Had that boy left the fish behind for her? Just before she drifted away, the memory of her last fight as a genin came back to her. It had been far away from here, in wind country, where the air was dry and the sand shone in the moonlight. They had brought out a white cloth there with names etched on it in black, showing the matchups for the third exam. She could remember it now. It had been the very first name. Uzumaki Naruto. If you like this content, don't forget to like and subscribe. See you later, bye bye.